In 2021, I was helping my mom clear out my grandma's basement, and we came across some silver platters that my grandma had stockpiled over the years. I decided to be a good son and look up how much they went for, so I googled the brand, Oneida. And as it turns out, I was literally given a sex cult on a silver platter, and with my tism fully triggered, I had to go ahead and jump down this rabbit hole and find everything I could about them. So find a comfy space in your goon cave as we look into the 19th century sex cult that your grandparents accidentally supported. In the mid-19th century, a small secluded community in upstate New York became the center of one of the most unconventional religious experiments in American history. Known as the Oneida Community, it was a place where traditional social norms including marriage and family were radically redefined. But what began as kind of like a utopian society quickly spiraled into a world of manipulation, control, and controversial practices. At the heart of the Oneida Community was its leader, John Humphrey Noyes. Noyes was a charismatic preacher who believed that he had achieved a state of perfection. Where have I heard that before? He founded the Oneida Community in 1848 based on the idea that humans can live without sin by embracing communal living and rejecting traditional monogamy. The concept of perfectionism was the cornerstone of their community. Noyes and his Noyans, as it were, they followed a belief much similar to Perfect Cell in Dragon Ball Z.
I want to be perfect!
Stating that once they achieved that state of perfection, basically everything would fall into place. From this state of perfection, they could transcend the needs for anything like private property, traditional family structures, and monogamy. The Noyans introduced the concept of what's called a complex marriage, where every member of the community was considered married to every other member, meaning that sexual relations could occur between any adult in the group at all times, as long as both parties were willing. And as we all know, people in cults never ever disagree with the leader. Monogamous marriage to them was a bit of a beast. So the complex marriage was pretty much there to help eliminate jealousy and promote equality. But in reality, the Noyes really used that as a tool of control. Fun fact, Noyes is usually credited with terming the coin free love. So if you ever think of hippies talking about free love, you got the guy who did all the silver plates to thank for. Noyes reserved the right to approve or disapprove of who could engage in sexual activity, and he would often use his position to manipulate and assert power over his followers. It kind of reminds me of the 12 tribes and how they get to be selective over who gets to be in what relationships. Upon researching the Oneida Community, there were actually quite a few parallels I've seen between the two. I know that one's a bit of a stretch, but that was actually the first thing that I thought of. Noyes' death grip over the community grew stronger as he claimed himself to be the prophet. He also declared himself as the sinless man, and he had overcome all other human flaws. Followers of Noyes believed that if they followed the same rules that set forth by him, they could also achieve this state of perfection. Any kind of dissension or disobedience was not tolerated. This is where a lot of cult brainwashing greatest hits kind of trickle in. Noyes managed to convince a lot of his followers that his vision was the only vision. His way is salvation, creating an environment where free will was basically subjugated by a manipulative and strict set of rules. This recipe for a psychological and emotional strain really kind of put that death grip around their throat this time. Any kind of idea for any kind of free thought was kind of pushed aside by Noyes. Now, even with that, a lot of people just think, oh, cool, it's a really neat sex cult. That seems pretty fun. But, of course, with every sex cult, there always is some kind of problem. There is a few not terrible things that happened as well. Women's roles in the commune were much different than most cults, as the women here were not stuck with a role of only being a childbearer, caregiver, or a member of the harem. The Oneidans functioned a little differently, as the mother did not have to be the sole caregiver of the children. In their mansion in the commune, they actually had a communal daycare. This way the mother was not bogged down to just one role and had some freedom. This parental model, however, will definitely be coming up again, and we'll get back to it here in a moment. Basically, kid pops out, hands off to nanny, and mom never has to hear about Fortnite or Roblox or whatever the 19th century equivalent was. Also, there was some kind of pseudo birth control where they got to practice what was called coitus reservatus, that essentially pulling out and never wasting your seed.
I can't goon!
Even back then, because it was the 19th century, coitus was mostly viewed just for childbearing. However, The Noyens actually viewed it not only as a way to bear children, but they also viewed it as a way to create some kind of connection between one another.
Ha! Gay!
With the Oneida community basically just being gangbang central at this point, of all of this crazy, nasty stuff going on, there was really only 12 unplanned births between 1848 and 1868, which, considering that they were literally called a sex cult, that's pretty low numbers.
I'm pregnant.
So again, it's a sex cult at the end of the day. It's not the worst thing to write on the pamphlet, but at the end of the day, it's still a cult. Speaking of conception, the Oneida community did something what they called scientific breeding, or as we all know it, eugenics. It's literally just eugenics. It was known as stripiculture and was actually a proto-eugenics program. They essentially was created by Noyes, and it was implemented around 1869 with the goal of creating the most physically perfect children. 53 women and 38 men participated in this program. The Oneida community even built an entire wing onto their mansion to accommodate this project and all the births. The experiment yielded 58 children. 9 were actually Noyes children. The parenting model from before comes back as essentially, as the child is born, it's handed off to the nanny and taken to the new wing of the Oneida mansion. The parents were allowed to see the child and visit, but heavy bonding was frowned upon by the community. Less fun fact, according to the Zygon Journal of Religion and Science, stripiculture was considered the first positive eugenics experiment in the United States, but was not recognized due to the religious framework from which it came from. Now I'm sure you're like, hey, where the hell are all these silver platters? I'm getting there, Believe me, I'm just giving you some of this weird shit first.
Hold your horses!
Now, despite its success in its early years, they created a large, flourishing economy with manufacturing of silverware, like I said. The community began to face some internal strife, though. By the early 1870s, tension grew and a lot of people started questioning Noyes' leadership. In 1879, Noyes actually fled the country. He was actually informed by one of his most loyal members that he was going to be charged with statutory.
They're coming out here to pick up a cupcake.
There was a lot of accusations running around regarding his role, and he was believed to be coercing a lot of young women into relationships. And, well, I mean, you heard sex cult and children, you kind of knew this was coming. After fleeing, he left for Ontario, Canada. From here, he would send a letter back to the commune basically stating, hey, maybe we should dissolve complex marriages. Taking a play out of the Oliver North playbook and just telling them, just shred everything incriminating. The community really lasted until Noyes attempted to pass the leadership on to his son, Theodore Noyes. He was actually agnostic and he had absolutely no desire to take over the cult. With an internal power struggle going on and with their founder in exile, the community slowly dissolved. It was converted into a stock company by one of Noyes' other kids, Pierpont, which is a hell of a name. In 1886, Noyes came down with a sudden case of death. From there, he was returned to his beloved commune grounds where he is buried with other members of the community. After this, the silverware and the business side of things became the main focus of the community. The last member of the group, Ella Florence Underwood, passed away in 1950 at the age of 100, which is only a couple years older than me. The group would be rebranded as Oneida Limited, which would continue onwards until September 2004, in which they finally closed their doors for good. With the utopian dream surely gone and the business closed, it felt like the history of the Oneida community would go relatively unknown for the average person. The Oneida Mansion still stands and was designated as a landmark to the legacy of Noyes and the group, and even was the home to member Charles Guiteau, which I think I said right, the man who assassinated President James Garfield.
I want to kill the President of the United States of America. I'm not actually saying it.
Apparently during his time in the commune and in the Oneida group, Charles was so hated that they actually called him Charles Get Out, which is a wonderful name. To this day, you can still visit the Oneida Community Mansion. They hold tours, which would kind of be dope as hell to go on. Free love and a utopian society sounds cool on paper, but the manipulation and the eugenics give me a little bit of a sour feeling on the group, which I'm reminded now every time I break up the good silverware. And that was the story of the Oneida community. Group full of sex, drugs, rock and roll, and silverware. Was it a noble experiment in creating a better world, or a dangerous cult that manipulated its followers for gain? Personally, I feel more comfortable putting the Oneida community over here in C tier, in terms of wacky cults in the world. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to always goon ethically. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end. I really do appreciate if you made it this far. You guys are the best. Real quick, if you guys want to follow my social medias, they are here up on the screen. If something were ever to happen to this channel, that's the only way you would know. I do want to give a big shout out thank you on Patreon for my members Sebby Webby, Little Miss Magic Hair, Jin, Dane, Royal YGO, DK Domo, Hex, Floating in the Ether Somewhere, Gooseball, Panda Snoots, Meow Bubbles, Robo Sketchy, Olivia Oblivion, and Brittany. You guys are the best, and I really appreciate you guys for sticking around. We had a lot more crazy stuff coming up here on the Lore Luck, so if you guys want to stick around, that'd be great. I appreciate it. And as always, cheers.